Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Mehta sir is also here. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So I think we are getting participants in. So I guess let's wait for like a few more minutes and then we can start.
Yes, yes. 10:05. 10:05.
Yes, sir. Yes. So for the participants who have just joined, we will be waiting for a few more minutes for more participants to join in, and then we will start at I think around 10:05.
Yeah, we start, Tushar.
Yes, sir, we are slowly getting more participants, but I think we can start now.
We
So,
start.
a very good morning. Yes, sir. Very good morning to all, and welcome to the fifth webinar in the Every Friday webinar series, a platform for young minds to express their ideas. My name is Architect Tushar Mandal, and I am a teaching faculty at the Periyar School of Architecture, New Delhi. Today's webinar will be about biophilic design methodology, presented by architect Abhinav Gupta. First and foremost, I would like to thank and honor our mentor, architect Premendra Raj Mehta, who was also the former president of the Council of Architecture. Sir, if you could just please say a few words and motivate all of us.
Yeah. Good morning, Tushar. Good morning, Abhinav, and all participants. Very warm welcome in New Year. Uh, Let me tell you that this is an initiative at Periyar School at New Delhi to engage young minds in generating new ideas. The whole purpose of this series, which is a weekly series, is to invite those young architects or students or people from any stream who have an idea which they would like to share and which could contribute in improving human habitat and our own surroundings, immediate surroundings. So in this series, we have had some very, very interesting discussions, beginning from ideas to deal with the systems of education, ideas to deal with a typical vernacular architecture in hilly terrain, and so on. We have also dealt with some ideas on applications of softwares and, if applied, how it could change our professional practice and also at the back end, the educational system, so that we have access, market access in the globe. We have we become contemporary in terms of applications of software, and we could have new occupational opportunities for the youngsters. So some of these are, and then of course, one of the idea is that if there is a bottleneck in development of an idea with governmental policies, I think we would touch upon that, and Periyar School would carry that forward with the respective bodies of the government to create an atmosphere, create an environment when the newer ideas can flourish. We would also have some interesting informal programs in the summer. Very soon we would be making announcement for those. Those are open for all. You see, this would be a public institution where anybody can come and learn anything connected with architecture and its little connection with the development of society. So we would have teacher-centric short-term courses in summer, maybe 4 weeks, 2 weeks, wherein an expert of a subject would evolve his own program and run a studio, and that could also entail a site visit or visit to a particular location, a climate zone, to understand the nuances and particularly region specificity related with architecture, or it could be newer technology. We are trying to tie up with the BMTPC, which is a nodal agency of Government of India to promote newer technologies, that how those could be brought in these kind of specialized courses, so that the young minds and old minds together, they can certain newer things. So Tushar would share with you in due course some more
Sir, I think you got cut off.
very warm welcome, Abhinav, once again. I think we can get going, Tushar.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So now I will introduce our speaker for today's webinar, architect Abhinav Gupta. Abhinav completed his BAs from Jamia Millia Islamia and followed that with a PGD in Liberal Arts through the Young India Fellowship. Currently, he is working with CMAC Consultants and has worked on a number of green industrial projects. Today, he will be talking about biophilic approach to designing improved human habitats. I would request Abhinav to now begin his presentation.
Tushar, are you sharing the screen? Tushar, are you sharing? Okay.
Yes, is the screen visible now?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, so yes, you can start.
So first of all, very good morning to all of you. So thanks for waking up on a holiday. I mean, I have a holiday at work for sure for Makar Sankranti, and I have woken up just to give this presentation. Thanks to Tushar and Mr. Mehta for giving this opportunity to give a small talk on what I basically do and what I have learned through my learnings while practicing architecture and other things. Uh, so initially, we would go on with a very basic thing that I would ask. Uh, I mean, as we kind of work towards life in general, why do you think are we? Uh, I mean, are we bound to going to parks, going to lakes, going to the hills, wanting to go holiday? Uh, I mean, a very basic thing that I noticed throughout this journey of mine was that humans have a certain amount of liking for nature and its elements. And when we are kept away from that, we basically are not the happiest creatures to be. Based on this is something which is called biophilic architecture, which we'll talk about during the course of this presentation. Uh, Tushar, can you take me forward? Yeah, so as the picture shows, I mean, there are people who are like kind of having a good time in the hills. The next picture probably would show how people are having a good time. Okay, this is again the hills. Okay, the next one shows people having a good time around the ocean. So again, an element of nature. And then this is somebody who's relaxing somewhere in the forest, and on the face of it, he looks quite relaxed. Uh, so an interesting thing is when we look at some data, in fact, it's quite interesting to note that the happiest country by the World Happiness Index is Bhutan, which is not a very well-to-do country. It's not a country of rich people, but we can easily see that it is something a country which is doing really really well on the happiness index. When we look at the data for India, barring Delhi, all cities that we see in the top 10 in the happiness index are Goa, Sikkim, Pondicherry, Mizoram, Nagaland, which is all either ocean cities or cities with the hills. So basically, a common factor driving this is the presence of being around nature in them. In fact, Delhi also, to my surprise, when I've been reading about it, although it has a very poor air quality index, is one of the greenest capitals in the world, with a lot of greenery around in terms of if you travel on our ring roads or if you um, travel around, you'll find a lot of um, urban forests and ridge areas, so to say. So all that's common in this is basically presence of nature. Uh, as we go into like historical context, you will realize that all old forts and buildings would have a lot of greenery in them. So, for example, the Amer Fort, as you see in the picture, has a multiple garden concept, has a water body in it. Uh, and when we kind of look back into history, there were a lot of passive techniques which would use nature. That time, the idea was not to kind of use these uh, things as biophilic, but the idea was to basically kind of talk about using these natural elements to cool a building. Uh, And as move forward, and I mean, we're all very, very familiar with the Taj Mahal for sure. Right in front of the Taj Mahal is a very, very nice water body and a char bagh, which is all, I mean, basically bringing elements of nature around a built element to create like a nice positive space in terms of its microclimate and also it's the way it looks. This, I mean, this is not the correct picture that I want to show probably of the Fatehpur Sikri, but Fatehpur Sikri also has these nice water bodies. There's a stage in between of the water body. So for the historic context, even when the king would want to listen to a musician sing live, the stage was in between like a water body to create a positive impact and a positive visual impact on the courtiers and the king. So and but as we move forward, I mean. Uh, and even in the international context, for that matter, when we look at the gardens of Babylon, um, it's all green, water, a, a water stream, a lot of creepers, which is all bringing in elements of nature within like a built space. Uh, but as we, I mean, there are a lot of examples that we can probably be showing on this. It's an endless thing, but as we move forward into the urban areas, a major concern that we feel is that there is not much. So in the earlier times, there was the history of a lot. There was the privilege of having a lot of free space and like having stuff, a lot of greenery, and being able to have make those water bodies, etc. But in the urban context, when we look at say a place like Chandni Chowk or any urban area that is densely packed with buildings, there's not much scope of having the luxury of space and planting big gardens and having lakes, etc., etc. And one thing that I noticed for myself was when I started to work in the corporate and be in the office for long hours, and then the next thing I would do after office would probably come back, go to a gym, which was also an enclosed space, and then come back to my house. I started to not feel very happy about myself. I was usually somebody who was having a lot of negative thoughts running, etc., etc. Uh, at this point in time, I thought of doing something in the open and going back to the nature. And instead of going to the gym, I started going to, say, the akhada, which is an open space, and interacting with the akhada, rolling myself in dirt was not really, I mean, it's not the most hygienic experience, but I probably felt much happier by doing all those things than probably going to a gym. Uh, thoughts, things like this, like made me realize that there is something which basically connects us with nature, and that nature kind of makes us really feel happy. Um, and that's when I started to kind of think very, very deeply about stuff. Uh, at this point, so the pictures here will are showing the issues that I was talking about in terms of urban areas having a lot of densely packed um, buildings, not much space for greens. तुषार आगे करना. Yeah, so this image, yeah, so this is what I was talking about. This is exactly how I used to feel when I was in between of an office space and then in a closed gym, then in a closed bedroom. And within a place like Delhi, there's not much luxury of having a house, which not everybody can have a house where you can like see the foliage of a tree and probably see a lake outside of your house, etc. Uh, and at this point in time, I was lucky enough to kind of get admission at the Ashoka University, where I went and studied a lot of courses. And a course that really kind of impacted me was a course called Global Ecosophy. Ecosophy comes from the word ecology and philosophy. So the philosophy of ecosophy is ecosophy. And when we were studying ecosophy and studying a lot of history and stuff, we realized that all through in the history, there was a lot of talk about about nature in our folklores, in our songs. So, for example, uh, Tushar would know because he's from West Bengal. Uh, Bengal has a lot of culture of baul music and bhatiali music, and all bhatiali songs and baul songs are about kind of talking about nature, giving back to nature, and the sort of impact nature has on us. And this is when I realized that, I mean, it's not just me who has this kind of attraction and love for nature and feeling happier around nature. It's basically almost all of us. So people, even if we are like not ready to agree that we are all nature lovers, uh, some part of us does feel relaxed when we are around nature. And this is the whole idea behind biophilic architecture, where we kind of combine nature with built form in order to create a conducive space, not just, I mean, not which is not just a green building. I mean, a green building can be a building without looking green, but basically a building which has elements of nature, say a water body, or say something like a lot of greenery, etc., where you kind of look at them and feel close to nature, and that creates like a conducive space to harbor positive mental health within a built space. Tushar, can you take it forward? Forward, yeah, I've already spoke. So yeah, so the word biophilic comes from biophilia. Biophilia, if you guys have studied science, comes from, so we've all heard in chemistry of hydrophobic and hydrophilic reactions. And hydrophilic basically is things that are attracted to water, and hydrophobic is that reactions that are not attracted towards their affinity to water. That the philic part of it comes from there. Philic is basically having a liking. Biophilic basically means having a kind of liking for the bio, which is the nature. And so that's the whole idea about the biophilia, is kind of what combined with architecture creates biophilic architecture. And can you make it forward? Yeah, so this image is very, very nice, and not a very colorful one, but it shows how we can basically kind of combine the greens and built environment to come up with a solution, which is the biophilic architecture. Can you make it forward? Forward. So yeah, if you guys have एक slide पीछे जाना तो शायद. So I don't know how many of you like fond of cartoons and all, but when I was younger, I would start my day with a lot of cartoons, and right before going to school, there was a show called Powerpuff Girls that used to come, where this gentleman kind of mixes a lot of good things to come up with these superpower girls called the Powerpuff Girls. So in my opinion, something like biophilic architecture is almost like that. You kind of mix nature, water, buildings, boom, 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 and a good thing appears, and that is biophilic architecture for me as a person who is a kid at heart. Uh, can you take it forward? So this picture, for example, shows a space where they've kind of created a lot of green spaces within an enclosed space, which kind of creates that positive impact. Again, this is a very luxurious space to have, and it has all the scope of creating, I mean, planting trees with big foliages, etc. Uh, take it forward. And then these are examples where the luxury of space is not all that much, and we have tried to incorporate small elements of greens within an enclosed space, say by having planters around where people sit, etc. I mean, for that matter, I've not really shown my office. My office, for that matter, has a very nice vertical garden within itself. Although we do not have a lot of space uh, in terms of I mean, having it where we can use it, but that wall creates a positive impact on us, and across that is a statue of a tiger. So tiger combined with that green creates a very, very positive impact on us, because when we go, we kind of feel the affinity to the greens, we feel the affinity to that tiger. We kind of try and relate ourselves to that tiger, and that is how we basically kind of do it at my office. I'll see if we can probably show that picture to you later. Can you take it forward? So now I'll probably take it to how I do it professionally. Uh, Take it forward. Yeah. So I mean, lately I was designing this factory, which is an electric vehicle factory. So all the things about it are green, etc. But the problem that we face here is it's a jam packed. So the I mean, when I started to talk about biophilic architecture and trying to inculcate nature to our to the guy who I was selling the design to, which is the owner of the company, he said, "Okay, that's all good. I mean, I like all your concepts, but I basically want the maximum FAR to be used. I want the whole plot to have like the maximum usage, etc." And stuff like that kind of created a lot of. I mean, he's practically right. He's bought that land for crores of rupees. Why would he want to kind of create these gardens and waste space? So what we've tried to do there is within that small area, we've tried to create a lot of wherever we could create plantations, in especially in front of place of of the human level of the workers, so that I mean, if somebody tries to kind of look out, all he sees is trees, etc. And because they within a factory setup, when somebody is working and seeing machinery and listening to the sounds of metals rubbing against each other, it's a very negative experience. But I mean, if we can add a small element of people just looking outside and looking at the greens, etc., is enough to kind of create that feeling of positivity for the workers. And in my humble opinion, I feel that if we can kind of inculcate this, especially for industrial architecture, at a policy level, it's going to be really good for the industries themselves, because there's a lot of negativity that runs in the industries. There's a lot of people who commit suicides in terms of being in that industrial area, etc. But and that's all because of poor mental health. And if we kind of inculcate this biophilic element in industrial areas, it's really going to kind of create a positive impact on workers. In fact, if we cannot really have a biophilic area within like an industrial complex, we can definitely create industrial townships where, just like for homes, when we step out of our houses in Delhi, we will find something green at a kilometer or two. We can walk down to a park, we can cycle down to a park, etc. But industrial townships are these huge uh, hundreds of square kilometers of area with not really anything green around them. So it's a very negative space to be. So that's the whole idea, and we've tried to kind of create these small plantations at eye level and create these small gardens, so that the moment somebody is out of that factory, they can spend some good time trying to eat their food, etc., in the gardens. In fact, a very interesting thing while I was working with this design with my team was we realized that people are not happier when they are kind of in conducive environment, or they are under constant air conditioning at 23 degrees and feeling the comfort, etc. They tend to have better productivity when the the winds, etc., are more like nature, which is not something constant but changing periodically. So the moment something is monotonous in a for a human body, it tends to create a feeling of being artificial. And although it will create a very positive feeling for the body, but you mentally do not really feel very nice about it, because the feeling of something which is totally constant is often linked by the human body as something artificial. आगे करो और आगे. Okay, so this is again This was a dream project for Hero, where they were doing an R&D center. And as you can see in the picture, there's a lot of green roofs. There's a lot of water bodies within that complex, which that kind of creates a positive feeling. And the idea behind this building for this company was, so they had these huge industrial buildings where they would kind of uh, make the automotives. But this R&D center was a place which would often be visited by the management and the associates of this company. And the idea was, when somebody comes to an R&D center, they should feel very, very positive, because R&D center is not like an assembly line where we just have to kind of back to back create those things. An R&D center is a place where there's freedom of ideas. You are kind of researching, talking about new things, etc. So the moment you kind of have this kind of a green and a space with a lot of water bodies, and even in fact, even the building is not something which is designed in a monotonous fashion. It's designed in a manner that it looks kind of organic. So it all this combined creates a very, very positive feeling on the users by the end of it, and then they are able to do something like research better, because research is only harbored when a human is feeling very positive. Okay, can we take it forward? So this project again talks about some biophilic interiors. And although while making all of this kind of costs quite a lot, because there's a lot of ductless air conditioning that goes with it and stuff, uh, the whole idea of creating this green space on the walls right in front of where the assembly lines is uh, that even when people are not able to look outside, but these workers are still exposed to this greens. And very interesting thing that is not really visible in the pictures is the drainage. I mean, like the watering pattern of these plants that goes. There's a constant sound of like moving droplets that is felt when you walk past it, and all this creates like a feeling of being around a natural water body, which creates that positive impact on the people using this building. आगे चलें. So these are some examples of when we tried to do this at a very, very small scale in urban areas with while I was working with a company called Grecor, where we were doing these green decorative gardens and green decorative interiors, just to create that feeling of biophilia within a small enclosed space. Uh, Now, this is again a project that I was working on, and a very good part about it was that it is bang on inside the hills. There's a lake right in front of it, so it does really fulfill a lot of dream biophilic ideas for me. But something that I realized in the hills was that while it is very, very serene, there's a lake in front of it, etc. One part that's, can you take it forward, please? Uh, Yeah, so one thing that I realized was that while you are visually really feeling the nature, you can't really kind of hear anything because there's no moving water, and you can't really experience nature by touching it, etc., because all trees, etc., are kind of huge and at steep heights. So, kind of trying to solve that, I tried to kind of design in a manner that there is touchable green space, so gardens there within the space, and there is, although this, I had a very, very long discussion with the client that I had, that we have a very big lake right in front of us. Why do we need uh, like fountains, etc.? So the idea of having a fountain and a stream in the back of this building was to kind of create that sound of moving water, which creates that conducive feeling of positivity on the site. In fact, the sound of moving water has been used very, very. I mean, in a lot of spaces in Japan, especially in the Zen architecture and Zen gardens. So I kind of drew inspiration from that, so that that sound of moving water creates that feeling of being around moving nature and life. Because a sound of movement creates a feeling of liveliness within a person, which is kind of missing when everything is calm and you can't really listen to sounds. So it's all in all, biophilic is not just about what you see, but it's like what you feel, what you smell. So is all that combines to create that biophilic effect. Can you take it forward? So this is again another project which was again close to nature. We were designing in Ramgarh, which is very beautiful hills in Uttarakhand. And here also we've kind of used the same principles that told about in the previous building. A very interesting thing is that the person wanted a bar inside of the house, and we instead of giving the bar inside of the house, we proposed the bar in a balcony which is covered to kind of so that a person can enjoy his time having his drinks while kind of not just looking at nature through the glass, but kind of feeling it by sitting here. And in fact, this was proposed because I noticed a lot of people when I used to travel, people would not really just if you're in the hills, people tend to not sit in the bar of a restaurant or in a hotel. They would rather want the hotel to organize a bonfire and all that stuff to kind of feel that they are more in the hills. Keeping this in mind, we kind of designed the whole bar and an open drawing room kind of setup in that semi-closed area so that it's not just visual impact on people, but the impact of winds and smell that they feel that they're in the hills. Can you take it forward? So this was a very interesting uh, thing that I worked on. This was an international competition where we were supposed to design a restaurant. So as you see, there is a overhanging cantilever of wood, and that's kind of open from the top, and that would of course get in a lot of negativity in terms of बारिश आएगी तो क्या होगा, हवा आएगी तो क्या होगा, etc. But we covered that on top, and we created a lot of creepers on that so that when somebody looks into that, it looks green. In fact, because of my love for biophilic, I called the lower part of this design Cafe Biophilia. On one side of this design was a paludarium. Paludarium is nothing but, so if you guys have known of what an aquarium is a space where you have water and you kind of replicate oceans or lakes in your house to keep fish. Paludarium is a place where you kind of replicate a small jungle ecosystem within a glass box. And these glass boxes don't only have like plants, but they have small crickets and insects, etc., that creates that sound of nature. And there are small perforations in this that helps in keeping the plants having natural air coming onto them, and smells coming out of it that creates uh, the feeling of nature going to people who are using this space. So this idea was to kind of create a restaurant space within an urban area in Paris, where people were obviously looking at the river right in front of them, but they could disengage from the road on the other side and be intrigued about the things within this, and look at the paludarium and feel good about all the greenery between this commercially oriented city, which is Paris. Can you take it to the next picture? Okay, so this is not the best render. I did it when I was like a student. Uh, but the idea behind this was creating a glass box on the upper story of that restaurant where you can kind of look at the sky, look at the clouds in the day, the stars and the moon at night, and the overhanging thing over a river makes you feel that as if you're a part of that river ecosystem, and that also kind of creates that feeling of biophilia in it. Okay, this is again a project that not really a project. This is a competition that I did a few months back, where we also were able to bag a position in the top three. Uh, So this is a co-living space in California, and we've used some very good element. And biophilia, for that matter, is not just about elements of nature. In this particular project, we have replaced the conventional rectangular or square solar panels with hexagonal ones, and hexagonal ones placed next to each other to create a honeycomb kind of a look. And when we kind of are able to bring in some element of nature in terms of it looking like a honeycomb is also uh, like a part of making people feel that they are part of the nature. And because not everywhere you kind of, I mean, instead of a solar panel, I can't really put grass on top, but I can definitely create solar panels in a shape that makes people feel that they are closer to nature. So that's the reason we kind of use a honeycomb pattern for this. Can you take me to the next slide? Okay, so in this one, you can basically see that there are a lot of natural spaces for people to kind of sit, looking into the site. There are spaces for people to kind of play around, interact with nature, take pictures of flowers. And that's exactly the kind of use case we had for this. And there were a lot of green buffers that were created onto the front of the site so that we don't really get the sounds of traffic, etc. And we are kept away from that feeling of being around the commercial world because California is quite a commercial place. And within the buildings, between buildings, there were these uh, we're not able to show them in the pictures actually, but there were a lot of vertical gardens, etc., where people could farm their own spices, vegetables, etc., within this space that houses thousands of people. So you can't really have for thousands of people over the small side of about 10 acres. You can't really have gardens in the garden, and you can't really have farming for them in the gardens. But we gave them provision on every kind of overhanging balcony to kind of have a vertical space for them to kind of grow their own spices or herbs, etc., to kind of feel that they're closer to nature. So that's basically all from my side from for what I have done with biophilic architecture. I'm quite fond of it and passionate about it. Um, if there are any questions from anybody's end, we can probably go ahead with them.
Yeah, thank you, Abhinav, for the talk. It was quite elaborate and informative. Participants are now free to ask questions. If there is anybody who wants to ask a question, you can ask yourself to be unmuted, and I would give you the like I would unmute you, and you can ask a question. You can also write your questions in the Telegram discussion group that we have. Yes. So if anybody has a question, then please go ahead. Or if let's say, okay, so let me just start with a question of my own and to get the discussion started. Abhinav, you talked about when you were talking about the industrial projects, you talked about the policy level intervention in terms of green, like biophilic interventions for industries, right? For industrial spaces. But a policy level intervention can be on a like it's a level where which is not easily achievable or which is not easily approachable to us, like for example for to you as an individual, or let's say any other practicing architect. So what are some of the things that we on an let's say on an individual or an institutional level can do that would preferably be able to alleviate some of these problems, but let's say not maybe go to the policy level immediately.
So I personally feel that even if policies are made, they will do nothing until and unless individuals are well informed. So we as individuals can have a lot of sessions on giving people knowledge about this. So for example, as I already said, and I'll probably be repeating, people are not aware that kind of having these green spaces and having these things about nature within a built space create a positive impact on people who are going to be using the building. There's nothing about people feeling positive and positive mental health. And mental health is a topic which is not really talked about, but it is slowly and slowly being talked about, linked with things like feminism, etc. But nobody has ever thought that being inside of an enclosed space and not being able to interact with nature creates a very, very negative mental health for a person living within that space. So if we can kind of run these campaigns to kind of drive knowledge about how being around nature helps you, how being around. So it will not first create an impact on architecture. It will probably first create an impact on people wanting to go into parks, etc., etc. But slowly and steadily, in urban areas, when people would realize that it is not easy to access. So if you're in a corporate setup and you're in a huge building on the 21st floor and you feel that you want to go into a garden, you need to go down and walk around and reach a garden after 15 minutes, and you only get a break of about 45 minutes to have your lunch. So you've wasted 30 minutes walking. Uh, Walking while being healthy, 15 minutes is not something which is enough for people to have their lunch. So within spaces like where people need to have their lunch and have their personal time within offices and industrial spaces, if we can have these elements of greens or water bodies, or say, as I said, the paludariums, which is something which is not very vastly used in architecture, but having a small paludarium itself kind of creates that positive impact. So if we can start uh, giving people knowledge about this, I feel it'll create a bigger impact than what even a policy level change would.
Okay, thank you. So is there any other question?
Yes, I want to say something. Abhinav,
Yes, sir, please.
first of all, my compliments. You presented your idea exceedingly well. And let me straight away ask you, how about running a course on this subject? As you said, that we need to inculcate this as a scheme of things in the minds. So how about running a short-term course, 2-week course on this? And let's have it maybe for urban areas, as you said, that be our focus. So let's start how in an urban area we could do it, maybe in the workspaces or maybe in the living spaces, the residential spaces. Let's try it out. So let's try not only architects invited in that course, but let's invite the end users. Let them also understand that what good it can do to them. So it's a two-way traffic. Create a demand, create experts who can help them out. Let's try
So
it
this
out.
is actually a good idea, sir, because I mean, I have known Tushar for about 9-10 years now, and I have been having these discussions with him at home over macher jhol that his mom makes about creating positive workspaces and happier living spaces, and how we can do some research on doing that. But then we always stop ourselves because we have to kind of commercially run our houses, and nobody's listening to all of our things about biophilic architecture and positive and mental health, etc. But definitely, if we can kind of do these small knowledge drives more than courses for people who are end users
Yes.
about this, it's going to really create a positive impact on them.
So let's get going. And Tushar, connect him to Anil Bhatia and Mr. B.V.
Yes,
Sharma.
sir.
So we'll rope
Okay,
in
sir.
those two
Okay.
very senior architects who have interest in this subject. But Abhinav, you articulate, you lead. They'll be with you to run a studio on that.
Oh,
So
thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
great, absolutely great. Yeah, we can have more questions.
Yes, sir. Uh, I saw Rohan, I think, wanted to speak, and I think there's also Ashna after Rohan. So yeah, Rohan, go ahead and ask.
Hi, Abhinav. Great presentation.
Thank you
So
so
I
much.
wanted to ask you, like, with examples, like from Taj Mahal to like your current projects. So it's like in Taj Mahal, the elements of nature used to look very forced. Like they were not natural elements; they were created for sort of luxury. And even with the current projects, like when we see, it's really hard to replicate nature. Like for like say in a project say in Rajasthan, it's really hard to grow green stuff, like because I personally have been there a lot of times and it's really hard to grow stuff there. Like normally in Rajasthan we see keekers and all these small plants. And so how do you basically, if you are trying to replicate nature, and to give positivity and everything, how do you replicate it in a way where it doesn't look a bit forced and it comes naturally and just becomes a part of the area?
Very, very interesting question that you've asked. And I mean, this whole idea of biophilia is not really about creating green spaces which are forced. So I mean, I personally feel that, I mean, if you are, so Jaipur is okay. I mean, you can grow greenery there, but if we were, for example, to do something in Bikaner, for example, where we are around deserts, etc., you don't really need to kind of create spaces that look green and have a lot of water, because there's no water in a place like Bikaner. But if we can kind of use the natural elements of there, for example, the cooling of sands at night, for example, if we can use that as a part of our building, that is enough biophilia for me. And and as you correctly said, I mean, the older things, it was kind of forced, yes. It felt like there is a concept called the Char Bagh, and you have to just throw it in front of every Mughal building. But uh, and it was actually a lot of luxury, and I mentioned that in my talk, that at those times we had the luxury of space and all that stuff, and now we do not really have it. But if, for example, in a small house, we can just I mean, in fact, even having like an interior garden, for that matter, is something which is kind of forced, because an interior space is not supposed to have a garden. But if we kind of start doing these things, they will initially seem forced, but once they become like a part of being, they will not really look forced to you on your eye. And in fact, I mean, I'm not really the best person to talk about landscapes, etc., because that's not my field of expertise. But if we can kind of have these planters that grow as creepers, etc., like we uh, do in the hills, like in the project that I showed is all about that, it still kind of gives a more natural feeling as compared to like creating a forced garden in the whole space. So I think, and probably Tushar can also add, because he's also done some work around this.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you are the speaker right now, Abhinav, so I would rather that you answer the questions. But more or less, you have covered whatever, like, I feel also I had to say to Rohan's question. So, but we can obviously have a larger discussion on this later after the webinar is over, like, if Rohan still wants to go ahead with the discussion. I think Ashna also had to ask a question. So, Ashna, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hi Abhinav, great presentation. So I wanted to ask that how can we incorporate green areas in jam-packed areas like Chandni Chowk or in jam-packed areas like Japan?
So this question, probably somebody in Chandni Chowk, if he listens, they'll be like, okay, we don't even want a green area. But I mean, we can definitely do something about it. So, for example, I'll give you a small example from Spain. So, Spain had a lot of constraint of area and on not being able to make parks, etc. And they kind of in residential areas, they made it kind of mandatory for people to have some element of a vertical garden on their walls, and stuff of that sort. Now, in a place like Chandni Chowk, I would say that even those 6 inches of small plantation will create an issue, because every inch kind of counts in that area. But I mean, if we can do these creepers and all around buildings, and also another thing which we can probably do in a place like Chandni Chowk is to kind of restrict, first of all, the movement of traffic, create it like a pedestrian area, and then do the green interventions. That will probably do more good than kind of just straight away trying to push in green things and around that. And a very good example that I personally have seen is in Sikkim, so that the whole Mall Road in Sikkim, for example, used to be a place of havoc and a lot of traffic jams. They've kind of done away uh, with the traffic there, and said that you need to park and come here walking, or the maximum you can get is like a two-wheeler, which gives them a lot of space to kind of have small green interventions in terms of having a divider on the road which can have like greenery, or in front of every habitable space we have like these small, probably 2 feet wide uh, places to kind of have small plantations, etc. So doing an intervention like that might help more, and probably an expert on urban development will be able to guide us better on this, where we can kind of do our biophilic thought, and we can take from them the learnings of how to get away with these traffic nodes, etc., and come up with a solution. That might be a good idea to do in a place like Chandni Chowk or a jam-packed area in Japan.
Okay, thank you, Ashna, for the question. Is there any other person who wants to ask a question?
Well, I can't resist reacting. So permit me to
Yes,
intervene
sir,
again.
please, sir.
Abhinav, fantastic idea and a fantastic question you were confronted with, that what do we do in congested area? I think that's our problem. I think very rightly raised by Ashna, that and I think that's the challenge. And I think let us focus on that. So you see, there are two ways of looking at this biophilic architecture, and actually many ways, not two ways alone. Indoor, outdoor, congested area, and second, you have demonstrated in some of your project in hill area, where nature is coming into you. You can't stop coming in. And here is where in Chandni Chowk, we are completely devoid of it. You see, hard to even find a small little hole where you can see a sky. So you see, so that's the challenge. So let's take this one challenge, that where it is scarce, the nature is scarce, can we bring in something? Can this biophilic architecture can do something good to human beings? Let's focus on this. The other issue would be dealt with, as you rightly said, you are not the expert of that. So maybe landscape architecture, drip irrigation, these are many issues in the desert you may have to deal with. But let's focus on this. And we will try and take it two steps forward from your first maybe workshop which you would have. We would try to spread it, maybe a startup only dealing with that biophilic architecture in urban areas, and let's give some relief, I would say, not the very best, not what exactly you would like to have it in your outdoor spaces outside you, but let's do it indoors. Let's focus and let's see how people get benefited, and that would give us a kick to do more. So get going, Abhinav. I'm very pleased. This is a brilliant idea and needs to be carried forward as aggressively as one can do. So you need a startup, you need a team. Get going, and at our school, you're welcome. Get going.
So in fact, the thing that you mentioned, that if people are devoid and we can't really do anything in the urban space, as I mentioned, this product called paludarium, which is like an aquarium, but it has like plantations, and उसमें अंदर झींगर होता है, झींगर की आवाज आती है और आपको लगता है कि
Yes.
आप जंगल में ही हो. Something like
So
that
let's
can
do
really
that.
do well.
Yeah, so let's do that very aggressively. Um, see the beneficiary first. You see, experts on one side, beneficiary on the other side. So aggressive marketing of what good it can do to them, and that's the start point. So get going, and anything you need, just get connected to Tushar. We'll see what best can be done.
Yes, sir.
And we move forward very quickly. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
sir.
So we have one more question from architect Shoaib. He asks Abhinav, how can we deal with sick building syndrome through the biophilic concept?
Which syndrome?
Sick building syndrome.
कौन सा syndrome है, पहले वो बता दो, फिर मैं बता देता हूँ उसका आंसर.
I think architect Shoaib is here, so if you
Answer
want
zaruri
to.
nahi hai. You see, the very fact that the word sick comes in, I think
Yes, sir.
intervention is necessary. So
Yes, sir.
that's about all. The question itself has an answer.
जी sir.
सिक को ठीक करना ही पड़ेगा ना, क्या करना है क्या?
Yes, sir.
हाँ.
Okay, so but architect Shoaib, if you're here, if you want to go ahead and just add to it if you want, or like for example to the question. Uh, or okay. So is there anybody else who wants to ask a question? Because I think we are very close to the closing time now. So I'll take like one last question if anybody has one.
Okay, if there's no question, I will just
Okay.
end it by saying that, I mean, all of you, all of you nice people, thanks for spending a lot of good time with me for about 1 hour, bearing with the philosophical gyan that I was probably giving, and spend some time in a garden today and feel the biophilia around you. You will really feel happy about it.
Okay, so I would like to thank Architect Abhinav for the presentation, and also I would like to thank Mehta sir for his support and guidance. Before closing, I would like to inform everyone about the Every Friday webinar series being organized by the Peria School of Architecture. The webinars are a platform for young professionals to express their ideas and is aimed at students and young architects. Further, we will also be, as Sir mentioned, we will also be running short-term courses in summer schools. All of the information for future webinars in summer schools will be posted in our Telegram channel, so the participants, especially the students, are requested to keep themselves updated with it. With this, I would like to end today's webinar. I thank everyone present and please have a good day.